Hello all. So today we will be talking about Gilmore Girls as part of our character versus plot driven story projects. This is arguably one of the most popular shows ever. I know it's got a huge TikTok following and all of those things, because it is at the very core what a character driven show is supposed to be. That said, I think one of the best ways to study character driven stories is by studying their relationships. Before we dive in, I'm going to point out now that I will also be giving my opinion on things that happen in the show. Some of the content did not age well, and I will not pretend that it did. Nothing is exempt from criticism, and acting like the thing you like is beyond analysis is dense and useless. And so, as an avid fan of the show who has rewatched it countless times, I will be criticizing it and its characters. Also, since the show centers around the characters' relationships, I will be talking about each relationship as a whole as this first season progresses, which means we will keep bouncing back and forth between the season. So now, obviously, the center of the show is its mother and daughter relationships, which means it's not just Lorelai and Rory, but Lorelai and Emily as well. So let's start there. Rory and Lorelai's relationship is set up more as friends than mother-daughter, and that's it, at least in the first scene we see them together in. This is sort of an ongoing theme throughout the entire show. Laura felt like her mother was never really someone she could relate to, so she tries to be that for Rory. That said, she does overcompensate a bit, and it goes too far in the other direction sometimes, which really blurs the lines for Rory and kind of makes her think she can do whatever she wants. However, Lorelai wants better for Rory than she got, and that is very clear. People give Lorelai a lot of shit, and it's part of why I kind of want to do this whole series, but the reality is that she sacrificed a lot for Rory so that she could have better. And Rory goes total teenager on her mom after a hormone-fueled interaction with Dean. However, Lorelai is getting up and leaving the table mid-fight in their first couple of episodes is super childish, and then she finds her mom instincts and tells her how stupid it is that she doesn't want to go to Chilton because of a boy. And of course she's correct, but it's more the delivery than the content of the message here, which is true for much of the interactions with Lorelai and Rory. So fast forward, we're at the first day of Chilton. Was waking up late for her daughter's first day of school a massive mistake? Absolutely. But that alone does not make her a bad parent. Going dressed the way she was a questionable decision, but again, who cares? Even wearing something dirty or wrinkled probably would have been better than the denim and tie-dye. But again, doesn't make her a bad parent. If anything, going on, even though it would embarrass her, if anything, going into the headmaster's office, even though it would embarrass herself and Rory, shows that she's a good parent, because she could have just dropped her kid off and said, good luck, have fun, which she tried to do. But she goes in and she does embarrass herself in front of the headmaster and her mother. We'll get there in a minute. We see the first instance of Rory being unable to handle pressure is when this first major test comes up, and after her first bad grade at Chilton, and she absolutely loses it when she's too late to take the test, which is a concept alone I have problems with. The fundamental thing here is there are no real consequences as an adult in the adult world for being late once. Like, if I'm late to my job one time, my boss can be like, hey, don't do that again. They're not going to be like, close and lock the doors, you cannot come to work today. Like, that's not a thing. So I'm not really sure what the point of that was. The related consequence to that is she has less time to take the test. That's on her. But, okay. But Rory loses it in class, and her outburst was, in fact, unacceptable, but it was a result of a bunch of pent-up disappointment in herself, aggression she was feeling towards everyone else because they've been picking on her since she transferred to the school, and it was the first sign that she is unable to handle pressure. I want everyone to remember this when we get to the Yale years. She's not good under pressure. Um, Lorelai once again blames herself for Rory's stress, and she allows herself to be the problem and allows Rory that she will love her and be proud of her no matter what her future holds. This is what people should be talking about when they question Lore's parenting. By accepting blame, she absolves her daughter of consequences and critical thought, and that's not a great way to set her up for being a functioning adult. Um, but again, that doesn't outweigh the fact that we have been told over and over again that Rory is brilliant, Rory is smart, Rory knows what's going on, blah, 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 blah. If that is even a fraction of the truth, then she is old enough to fucking understand that she needs to process her own emotions and that some things are in fact her fault. People like to put a lot of the crappy things Rory does and blame it on Lorelai, and that does not fly with me. Rory is grown from a very young age, and it isn't. Some things are in fact her fault. When Rory has to learn a sport and Emily offers up Richard to teach her golf, Lorelai is clearly struggling with Rory enjoying her experience at the club, and honestly, that's perfectly understandable. Her parents were awful to her. There's no reason for her to assume that her relationship with them is going to be any different than Rory's relationship with them. Reverse that. That made sense in my head. Rory connected with Richard in a way that Lorelai never could and never had, and she really is doing her best to support Rory, but you can see how hard it is for her. This is when we get into more of the questionable parenting moments from Lorelai. Even when Lorelai just goes in on Rory for borrowing her sweater, it starts off with her being a normal mom and Rory just being a bitchy teenager in response to it, and it turned into a full childish exchange. However, her apologizing in depth to Rory was a huge moment. Lorelai always apologizes, even to Emily when Emily was the one that was wrong. And I think this is something that Rory never learned from her mom. Rory doesn't know how to accept responsibility. Rory doesn't know how to apologize. Rory doesn't know how to frame things in a world where she could be wrong. But Lorelai constantly accepts the blame and constantly apologizes and constantly, she's a very emotional person. She acts like that and then thinks about it later. But in the later, she always comes to the conclusion that she should apologize. And this becomes more clear as the series goes on, but that's something that Rory never got. So Lorelai did teach by example, and Rory just fucked off the lesson. Moving on to Rory and Lorelai's first interaction about Max. Rory is most definitely and rightfully weirded out about her mom dating her teacher. And that, again, spirals. We'll get to that later in the season. But dating your child's teacher, not a great mom moment. Now, when Rory has her first kiss, she didn't tell Lorelai she'd even been hanging out with a boy, but Lorelai saw them on Rory's birthday. So she starts momming and she starts stalking Dean, and it's hilarious, and it really carries that Laura was a teen mom trying to protect her daughter. Like, that for me is the message that whole scene of her like keeping an eye on him and Josie's and Luke coming up behind her kind of tells me is that Lorelai got pregnant really young, and she really, really wants the opposite of her life for her daughter. Rory's freak out about Dean coming over is just classic teenage behavior. Lorelai tried to do something very sweet, kind, and thoughtful for her daughter, and Rory was super weird about it, which, again, teenagers, hormones. Teenagers are the worst beings on the planet, and that's okay. That's by design. But let's move on to a very mother-daughter heavy episode, which was Rory's dance. Now, in this one, we get to see a lot of residual effects from Lorelai getting pregnant young and leaving home, and we will discuss the Emily and Lorelai side of this too. But when Lorelai screams at Rory after Emily screams at her, it's so clear that she is terrified and hurt, and she has a really bad mom moment. Not that there is any excuse for that, um, but your kids don't need to see your trauma. And teenagers screw up. It's like programmed in their DNA to do so. Again, they're the worst humans on the planet. So yeah, Rory effed up by staying up all night, but the response simply wasn't warranted. And I love Lorelai. I'm an avid Lorelai defender, but you know, it just doesn't work. And then we move into Lorelai breaking up with Max and then going to like the parent-teacher day at Chilton. Dating your kid's teacher, not cool already. Kissing your kid's teacher at her school, get a grip. Like, you are a grown adult woman. Yeah, people make mistakes, but as a parent, you don't get to make those kinds of mistakes. You need to learn to control yourself, have some basic situational awareness. It's not cute, it's not funny, it's not charming, it's just not okay. And honestly, I think Rory forgave her way too quick. But then obviously her and Max reconcile, and Rory is in full favor of this marriage happening. She pushes her mom a little bit in that direction as soon as Max proposes. Now, another thing you need to know about me is I am an avid Rory hater, and I will die on this hill. But I'm also going to record all the reasons why, because I got receipts. So let's start with the fact that she has the total not like other girls vibe to her, especially in that first episode when she's in class and the other girls are painting her nails and she's doing the assignment. And she thinks, it's very clear she thinks she's so much better than them. And then she makes fun of them with Lane after the fact. And it's very not like other girls, and it's so irritating. And then let's add into this the Love and War and Snow episode where Rory's just being a bad friend. That girl is so selfish and she never grows out of it. Lane is trying to talk to her and she's just entirely not listening. She's looking for a book. She's getting cookies for Dean. She's blowing her friend off for Dean. Totally not paying attention to her best friend. And yes, I know that they reconciled at the end of that episode, but there was no resolution. Like, Rory didn't really sincerely apologize. She's like, sorry, I got a lot of shit going on. Get over it. I'm going to be here for you, even though her actions demonstrate otherwise. It was a very shallow apology, and I don't take it. Sorry. Let's move on to Lorelai and Emily. Lorelai and her parents very obviously have a strained relationship. One of her sacrifices for Rory is her going to her parents for money. That was a very difficult decision for her, and some people act like Lorelai cut them off for no reason. Those people didn't grow up in abusive households. Those are but they're your family people, and we don't listen to those people because those people are fucking stupid. Emily uses the borrowing of money to manipulate her daughter. It's financial abuse. It's an actual thing. And sure, it comes from a place of just wanting to be in her daughter's life, but the actual execution is manipulative and gross. When Emily tells Rory, very smart man, your father, you must take after him. It's just such a horrendous thing to say to your granddaughter, especially in front of your daughter. Like, that's such a backhanded compliment, and it was unnecessary. Emily being at Rory's first day of school was a major overstep. This goes back to money manipulation. There was absolutely zero reason for her to be there. Forcing yourself into where you don't belong is beyond inappropriate, but it is a totally Emily Gilmore staple. That said, the sentiment of her wanting to buy things for Rory so she fits in is nice. That said, Lorelai not being willing to let her spoil the hell out of her is great parenting. Emily wanting to buy Rory a car is also overstepping, and Lorelai is doing her best to keep her daughter grounded and not spoiled. I am so upset to say that later in this series I will point it out, but she fails. And it's not Lorelai's fault. It's entirely Emily and Richard's fault. But Emily trying to have the internet installed at Lorelai's house without her knowledge or permission is way overstepping, inappropriate, and overbearing. When Lorelai talks about her parents trying to control everything, this is exactly what she's referring to. I love that Lorelai tells her mom off that early in this series. Emily needs to back the F up. We start off episode 3 with establishing how often Emily fires her help, as well as how she doesn't even see them as people. She can't be bothered to remember her cook's name. That is important. I feel like this gets overlooked when everyone's like, oh, I love Emily. Emily's great. Emily was a terrible mother and person. Like, I get being particular and wanting your house and wanting things done a certain way, but to not remember the names of the people you employ to take care of your shit, it's not great. It's not a good look at all. When she says they're upstairs gathering dust along with the rest of her potential, Emily being smug is kind of ridiculous because yes, Rory ends up enjoying herself at the club, and the only one reading the room was Lorelai. Rory did not want to go. Richard did not want to take her, and Lorelai was the only one that sees that. Again, Emily pushes beyond something that was not her business. Now we get to Rory's birthday party. Emily reaches out to Lorelai because she wants a relationship with Rory like Lorelai has, but then she really botches it with the party itself. Emily claims it's like her right to do so, and then invites Rory's classmates without asking her. How is that at all appropriate? That party was for her and nobody else. Who throws somebody a birthday party without asking their input on who they want at their birthday party? That wasn't for you. That wasn't for her. That was for Emily to show off her granddaughter, and it's weird. Now, I'm not quite sure who to blame for the fact that Richard and Emily had never been to Rory and Lorelai's house until the birthday party, but I am going to put it on both of them. Now, this next thing I want to talk about is built off a scene Lorelai isn't even in. But when Rory gets stranded at her grandparents' house because of the snowstorm, and Rory's going through the photo album with them, they get to Lorelai's debutante photo, and it's so obvious that Emily and Richard are still bitter and angry about Lorelai getting pregnant and ruining their life plan for her. And what I don't understand is the cognitive dissonance that it takes to say that you love Rory and care about her while simultaneously being so angry at your daughter for getting pregnant and having her in the first place. It's pathetic. And quite frankly, Lorelai built a great life for herself and her daughter, and for them to still be upset or angry or whatever because someone else's life didn't go according to their plan is weirdly overbearing and toxic. And that doesn't get better for like a while. In fact, we get to the school dance episode, and first of all, Emily bullies her way into being included. Like, I'm so sorry. I understand that she wants to be a part of their lives, but dances are a mother-daughter thing, not a grandma-granddaughter thing. You don't need to be there. You don't have a right to be there, and it's absolutely overstepping that she invites herself over to see Rory off. And then when Rory comes home the next morning, she thinks she can parent her grown daughter. Like, Emily has some serious entitlement issues. One semi-sweet night with your daughter doesn't magically make you in charge of anything or anyone in someone else's house. Emily has no boundaries, and it quite frankly doesn't matter what her reasons are. Her motivations are irrelevant. Basic human decency is respecting others' space, especially as the mother of someone who got pregnant at 16. Who are you really to be giving parenting advice? Like, you clearly don't know what you are doing, so why do you think your input matters? When we get to the Christmas party episode, Emily is so bitter and petty over what had just happened in Rory's dance episode. She uninvites her daughter to their annual Christmas party and ignores any attempts Rory tries to make to defend her mom. It's kind of hard to watch, really. How narcissistic do you have to be? The next real Emily outburst is when Richard's mom comes to town and she offers Rory her trust fund early. Emily's obviously just acting out of fear of losing her daughter and granddaughter again, but I've said this 1,000 times, your personal fear and trauma should not affect anybody else. The minute your trauma affects me, you're the asshole. Emily gets overbearing again when Rory shows her around Stars Hollow and takes her to the section of the inn where they used to live, and Emily is so offended that they would rather live there than with her that she runs off and redecorates a whole room in her house for Rory. Though the intention is kind of sweet, it also is really insulting to her daughter. Like, look at me, I can provide for your daughter better than you can. And this really just shows how delusional Emily is. She refuses to see how she was suffocating her daughter. Lorelai can't possibly have her own space because that would mean Emily isn't in control. And I know their relationship gets better, but like, it takes so long. And Emily still never really apologizes for all the trauma she causes her daughter. And that bugs me. Lorelai is the only Gilmore girl that takes responsibility for her actions, which means she didn't learn it from anywhere. She did that. She did the work, and Rory ignored it. We will get there. We can't round out the mothers and daughters without talking about Lane and Mrs. Kim, so here we go. Mrs. Kim is portrayed as an overbearing and unreasonable mother, but she asks about her daughter's day. She genuinely listens to the answer, and she just wants her to be healthy and safe. Yes, she's overbearing. Yes, things happen in later seasons that make her a questionable parent, but her true intentions are no different than Lorelai's. She just wants what's best for her kid. The next main relationships to focus on are the Gilmore Girls romantic ones. So Max for Lorelai and Dean for Rory in this first season. Let's start with Rory and Dean. First of all, baby Jared was such a bad actor, and he really didn't find it until season 4 of both Gilmore Girls and Supernatural. But Rory has from the beginning not really known how to handle herself around boys. It's probably the most realistic part of the show thus far. She's so nervous and babbly, and she's the most awkward little nugget in season 1. And she clearly has a thing for Dean, but she has absolutely no idea how to handle it. When they actually start dating, it's all hormone charged and over emotional. When we get to the Donna Reed episode, I have many problems with it, the core of which being the audacity that Dean had to say that it was kind of nice. The concept of, because they're actively watching Donna Reed, and he's like, I don't see what the problem is. Well, the problem, Dean, is that in the 1950s, women were forced back into the home after being in the workforce, and they were heavily medicated because their husbands were suffering from PTSD from war and were getting beaten to shit every night. Donna Reed is a glorification of one of the roughest times for women in history. So fuck off with that. It was kind of nice. But really the problem I had was with Rory playing Donna Reed. Like, that was her date night idea. Can you please stick to your morals a little bit? Like, you just tossed them right out the window. Well, I did research, and she was actually an uncredited producer on a lot of the episodes. Why was she uncredited, Rory? Why could that have been? Maybe that reveals actually a bigger problem than a solution. And then the fucking condescension of Dean sitting there going, I'm glad this was an educational experience for you. Excuse me, douchebag. No. Anyway, I hate that episode. I think all around it's terrible. The bitch slap that would have immediately occurred to both of them. And then they break up because Rory wasn't ready to say I love you back. Y'all are children, babies, infants, fetuses. And we're just casually throwing the L word around and then getting all butthurt when you don't hear it back. It's very teenager. I get it. It was accurate writing, but it's still so irritating. Back to Max and Lorelai. We see the beginning of them in episode 4 at the parent-teacher conference. And what we really see is Lorelai's immediate mother instincts when she finds out about Rory's grade. Max asks out Lorelai at the bake sale, and she really struggles with the fact that he is Rory's teacher. But she decides to let him see her outside of school anyway. And she fights dating him so hard, which shows that she is a good mom. She wants what's best for her daughter, and she knows that dating her teacher probably is not that. That said, we all know what happens next. Max and Lorelai finally have their first date. When Max gets stranded in Stars Hollow and Lorelai finally takes him out, they break up because Lorelai's afraid of commitment, and then they get back together and he proposes. Next we have the girls' best friends, Lorelai and Suki and Rory and Lane. Rory and Lane are both quickly established as not like other girls, with not wanting to go on the hayride, and they bond over making fun of other girls, which stays constant for Rory, but not so much for Lane, and we see that a little bit later in the series. Um, Lorelai and Suki. Suki is classic comic relief, and Lorelai is the calm, professional, level-headed one. Suki tries to calm Lorelai down. It seems like a trend in their relationship. In episode 2, Lorelai comes into the kitchen and immediately starts ranting to Suki about how bad her morning was. This is now the third interaction that's all about Lorelai, where she doesn't even really acknowledge Suki, but talks at her as opposed to her. By episode 3, we have the fourth and fifth interaction between Laura and Suki that is all about Lorelai. Never once in the course of this show has Lorelai asked Suki a single question about herself at this point. In episode 4, Suki is obviously upset, and it still takes Lorelai babbling about herself for like 2 minutes before she even asks about her. And once again, we have interactions where Suki only exists to serve Lorelai. The bake sale and the diner scene after agreeing to go out with Max is still all about her. I will say Lorelai's biggest flaw is that she does get very caught up in herself. I wouldn't exactly call her selfish because she does sacrifice a lot to be a good mom, and there are plenty of great friend moments between her and Suki and her and Luke. But especially early on, she's very focused on herself, really until we get to the first date, like the double date episode. Lorelai has agreed to go on a double date with Jackson and Suki, with Jackson's cousin Rune. And obviously she pulls the short straw there, but she does everything she can to make sure that her and Jackson can get some time together, that they get ready together. She fixes Suki's hair at the restaurant when it doesn't feel like her anymore. They go to Luke's. She does everything she can to make sure that this first date goes really well for Suki. And that's really the first time we see her reciprocating this friendship. We have 2 more rather important relationships for each of the girls, and that would be Rory and Paris and Lorelai and Luke. Rory and Paris start their journey very early when Paris comes at her hard, and Rory, being at this point a very shy, wispy person, doesn't really know how to handle that. After Rory breaks Paris's diorama, however, all of Paris's hostility is justified. Again, situational awareness that Rory simply does not have. Rory and Luke have a sweet, playful friendship pre-dating, and it perfectly foreshadows their relationship very well. Luke bringing ice to Rory's birthday party and Lorelai clearly very happy about it says a lot. He anticipates her needs so well, and I think at the beginning they laid the Luke and Lorelai thing on super thick just to make us wait 4 seasons. The last relationship I want to talk about is Rory and Richard. Richard teaching her how to play golf not only jumpstarts their relationship, but it also starts to open Richard up to Lorelai and how she felt about being pregnant at 16. Richard and Rory ends up being one of my favorite relationships throughout the series. He buys her rare books and gives her money for her travels, and she talks to him about they understand each other on an intellectual level, and I think that is really great for him more than it is for her. But side note, Luke and Rory, him baking her a coffee cake and blowing up balloons and decorating a little table for her birthday is just so cute. And he becomes a really great father figure to her. Well, that was my rundown of season 1 relationships. I know we were kind of all over the place, but I think in order to truly understand the character development, you have to do the relationships as a whole. So we'll be back with season 2 hopefully soon. This is one of my most favorite shows, and it's one of the internet's favorite shows, so I really thought that it was important to kind of usher this one into this project as well. Again, questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the comments, and thanks for watching.